My younger sister was one of the few people in this world who truly knew me. We shared a lifetime of memories, inside jokes, and conversations that nobody else would understand. Then one ordinary phone call changed everything. Suddenly, she was gone, and for months afterward, I couldn't figure out how to keep living in a world that no longer had her in it.
Welcome back to God Showed Up Stories. Loss changes us, especially when it comes unexpectedly. There are certain people who become woven into the fabric of our lives so completely that we can't imagine a world without them. A sibling, a best friend, a parent, a child, someone who has known us for years, someone who shared our memories, someone who helped shape who we became. When they're gone, the loss can feel impossible to explain. The world keeps moving. People return to their routines. But grief has its own timeline. And sometimes, we begin wondering if we'll ever feel normal again. Maybe you've lost someone you loved deeply. Maybe you're carrying grief that others can't fully see. Maybe you've questioned God during a season of heartbreak. If so, this story is for you. Before we begin, take a moment to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share this story with someone who may need encouragement. And comment below. Love lives on. Never forget this. The people we love leave more behind than memories. They leave behind the impact they had on our lives. All right, let's get into the story.
My sister and I were only 3 years apart. Growing up, we were inseparable. We survived difficult childhood years together. When things were hard at home, we leaned on each other. When life felt unfair, we talked about it. When something good happened, she was usually the first person I called. We shared a language that only siblings understand. Inside jokes, nicknames, stories nobody else remembered. Even as adults, we stayed close. Life got busy. We had careers, families, responsibilities, but somehow we always found time to stay connected. Sometimes it was a phone call, sometimes a quick text, sometimes a family dinner. No matter what was happening in life, she remained one of my constants, one of the people I never imagined losing. Then, one ordinary Tuesday morning, everything changed. I was sitting at my desk when my phone rang. At first, I assumed it was a routine call, but the moment I heard the voice on the other end, I knew something was wrong. The words that followed didn't feel real. My sister had passed away unexpectedly. For several moments, I couldn't process what I was hearing. It felt impossible. There had to be a mistake. I kept expecting someone to tell me they had gotten it wrong, that she was okay, that everything was fine. But none of that happened. Instead, I found myself standing in a reality I never wanted to face. My sister was gone. The days that followed felt like a blur. Phone calls, arrangements, family gatherings, condolences. There were people everywhere. Yet somehow I had never felt more alone. At the funeral, I listened as people shared stories about her. Stories about her kindness, her humor, her generosity, the way she made people feel seen, the way she showed up when someone needed help. I knew all those things already, but hearing them through the eyes of others made me realize how many lives she had touched. Still, none of that eased the ache. When the funeral ended and everyone returned home, reality settled in. The world continued moving. Mine didn't. At least, not emotionally. I threw myself into work. Long hours became my escape. The busier I stayed, the less I had to think. At least, that's what I told myself. I volunteered for extra projects, worked late into the evening, filled every open moment with something productive. From the outside, people thought I was handling everything remarkably well. The truth was very different. I wasn't healing. I was hiding. Because grief has a way of finding us no matter how hard we run. It showed up unexpectedly. A song she loved playing on the radio, a family photograph, a birthday, a holiday gathering. Even something as simple as passing her favorite restaurant could stop me in my tracks. Every reminder felt like reopening a wound. Months passed. Friends stopped asking how I was doing. Not because they didn't care, because life naturally moved forward. But I felt stuck. And eventually, I became frustrated with myself. I started asking questions that many grieving people ask. Why wasn't I doing better? Why couldn't I move on? Why did it still hurt this much? Most of all, I struggled with God. Not because I stopped believing, because I couldn't understand. Why would someone so kind be taken so soon? Why would a family lose someone who still had so much life left to live? The questions kept circling in my mind, and the answers never seemed to come. Almost 9 months after her passing, my family gathered to clean out her garage. It was something we had been putting off. Nobody really wanted to do it, but eventually, it had to happen. The afternoon was filled with mixed emotions. Laughter over old memories. Tears over forgotten belongings. Boxes of photographs. Holiday decorations. Childhood keepsakes. Every item seemed attached to a story. Then I found an old notebook. At first, I assumed it was nothing important, just another item to sort through. But when I opened it, I realized it belonged to my sister. The pages were filled with handwritten thoughts, reflections, memories, life lessons, observations she had written over the years. I sat down and started reading, page after page. And then I came across an entry that stopped me cold. She had written about gratitude, about forgiveness, about relationships, about making the most of whatever time we're given because none of us know how much we have. One sentence in particular stayed with me. She wrote, "If people I love remember anything about me, I hope they remember that life is too short to stay angry, too precious to waste, and too beautiful not to appreciate." I must have read that sentence 10 times, maybe 20, because somehow, even though she was gone, it felt like she was speaking directly to me. The notebook came home with me that day, and for weeks afterward, I kept returning to those pages. The words comforted me, but they also challenged me, because I realized something. I had spent months trying to avoid grief, avoid memories, avoid conversations, avoid pain. Yet my sister's own words seemed to be inviting me toward something different, toward gratitude, toward connection, toward fully living. A few weeks later, after resisting the idea for months, I finally attended a local grief support group. I wasn't excited about it. Honestly, I almost turned around in the parking lot, but something told me to stay, and that decision will lead to a conversation that changed the way I understood grief forever. A few weeks after finding my sister's notebook, I couldn't stop thinking about what I had read. Most of the entries were simple, thoughts about family, reflections on life, little observations she had written down over the years. But one entry stood out. It wasn't long. In fact, it only filled part of a page. Yet those few paragraphs seemed to speak directly into the place where I was hurting most. She wrote about gratitude, about forgiveness, about how nobody knows how much time they have. And one sentence stopped me cold. Don't spend so much time worrying about losing people that you forget to fully love them while they're here. I read that line over and over again because suddenly I realized something. For months after her death, I had been focused entirely on what I had lost. And of course I had. Grief does that. But her words reminded me of something else. I had also been incredibly blessed. I had 40 years of memories, 40 years of laughter, 40 years of conversations. 40 years of having a sister who loved me. And somehow, in my pain, I had forgotten to be grateful for that gift. Not because gratitude erased grief, but because both could exist at the same time. A few weeks later, after resisting the idea for months, I finally attended a grief support group. I almost didn't go. Part of me believed talking about it would only make things worse. Part of me felt uncomfortable sharing personal things with strangers. But another part of me knew I couldn't keep carrying everything alone. The first meeting was difficult. Listening to other people's stories brought emotions to the surface that I had been trying to bury. Yet, there was also something comforting about being in a room full of people who understood. People who didn't expect me to be over it. People who understood that grief doesn't follow a schedule. After one meeting, a man around my age introduced himself. He had lost his younger brother several years earlier. As we talked, I found myself sharing things I hadn't said out loud before. The anger, the confusion, the sadness, the questions I still carried. Most of all, I admitted something I had been ashamed to say. I was frustrated with myself. I thought I should be handling things better by now. The man nodded. Then he smiled gently and said something I'll never forget. You don't get over losing someone you love. For a moment, I just stared at him, because those words felt completely different from everything else I had been hearing. Most people seemed focused on moving on, moving past it, getting over it, returning to normal. But he continued, the goal isn't to stop loving them. The goal isn't to forget them. The goal isn't even to stop missing them. He paused. The goal is learning how to carry that love forward. Something inside me shifted, because for months, I had been treating grief like a problem that needed solving, a wound that needed to disappear, a burden I needed to overcome. But maybe grief wasn't something to conquer. Maybe it was something to learn from, something to carry differently. The man told me how he eventually stopped avoiding conversations about his brother. Instead, he started sharing stories, remembering funny moments, talking openly about what his brother had meant to him. At first, it hurt. Then, it helped. Because every story became another reminder that love doesn't end when a life ends. Love continues through the people left behind. I left that meeting thinking about those words. And over the following months, I slowly began changing. Instead of avoiding family conversations about my sister, I joined them. Instead of hiding old photographs, I looked through them. Instead of changing the subject when memories surfaced, I shared them. And something remarkable happened. The memories that once felt painful started feeling precious. Not because I stopped missing her, because I started appreciating what we had. My family grew closer too. We laughed more, shared more stories, spent more time together. The loss was still real, but so was the love. One Saturday, nearly a year after my sister passed away, I volunteered at a local community event. As I helped families carry supplies and organize donations, I found myself thinking about her. She had always been the first person to help someone in need, the first person to show kindness, the first person to give her time. And standing there that day, I realized I was honoring her memory simply by continuing what she had taught me, not through grand gestures, through everyday acts of love. Looking back now, I don't believe God showed up through a dramatic miracle. I believe He showed up through a notebook, through a support group, through the wisdom of someone who had walked this road before me, through the realization that grief and gratitude can exist together. Today, I still miss my sister. I probably always will. There are still moments when a song catches me off guard, or a memory surfaces unexpectedly, or I wish I could call her one more time. But I've learned something important. Healing isn't forgetting. Healing isn't moving on. Healing is learning how to carry love forward. And every time I share a story about her, every time I choose kindness, every time I appreciate the people still in my life, a part of her legacy continues. And in that way, love never really leaves us.
If this story touched your heart, comment below. Love lives on. And if you're grieving someone you love, please remember this. There is no timeline for grief. There is no deadline for healing. And there is nothing wrong with missing someone who meant the world to you. Don't rush your healing. Don't compare your journey to anyone else's. And don't believe the lie that moving forward means leaving someone behind. The people we love continue shaping our lives long after they're gone. Through memories, through lessons, through kindness, through the love they gave us. If this story encouraged you, don't forget to like this video, leave a comment below, subscribe to God Showed Up Stories, share this story with someone who may need encouragement. Thank you for spending this time with us. And always remember, God always shows up right on time.